Hi, I'm David Pereira. Welcome to my channel. In today's episode, I want to talk to you about what not to do with user stories. Let's start with the following. User stories are not requirements. So, I'd like to share a story with you to make it clear. I started my career as a software developer. Then I became a business analyst, which means I was used to write extensive documentation, 20 pages of requirements, 30 pages, and sometimes even 50. And after that, I became a product owner. I guess you can see the problem, right? I started writing user stories, but I still had the mindset of a business analyst. I thought user stories was a way of representing requirements. That means I was thinking on the solutions upfront and then converting the whole solution into user stories. What happened was I was going to the developers and trying to get the estimation on the requirements. In this case, in the user stories format. The developers were frustrated. I thought I was helping them because I was focused on the solution and I thought they should focus on the implementation, writing code. I was wrong. User stories is a tool to collaborate. It's not a tool to transfer responsibility. I focus on the solution and developers focus on the implementation. It's totally wrong. If you want to write user stories correctly, it's not about writing at all. It's about building a shared understanding. Then you should understand the 3 C's of user stories. The first part is the card, which is, as a user, I want to do that, so I can achieve this. And then it comes the most important part and the most forgotten, the conversation. The conversation with the team is the moment where you focus on the problem, then you can identify solutions. And after that, you can write the acceptance criteria, which is the confirmation of the conversation you had. But generally, actually, it happens the contrary. The product owner writes everything up front, including the acceptance criteria, which is supposed to be the confirmation of the conversation. It's wrong to do like that, because then you don't benefit from the collaboration. First comes the conversation, and then the acceptance criteria. If you do that, you can benefit from maximizing the value by using user stories. The second problem I want to talk to you is the focus on the solution. User stories is about solving the user's real problems. So you should keep the perspective on the user side, not about the solution. It's about the problem. You don't talk about solutions until you understand clearly which problem you want to solve. So let me give you an example. Consider an online shopping. As a user, I want to be able to filter by price so that I can find the relevant products. If you think like this, I define the filter by price as a solution. And what about the problem? What are we solving? I would prefer also to use the user story in another format, starting with the why, and then it will be easier to understand the what. For example, what if we could write something like, to find the products which I can afford as a user, I want to be able to search for products inside my budget. In this case, if you think I want to identify the products inside my budget because that is what I can afford. The solution might be a filter, but might be something else. It depends what will come from the conversation. If I leave like that, once I present this as a product owner to the developers, we can talk about the problem. How can we solve this problem? And then we'll find a solution. But if I say about the price filter, I am focused already on the solution. And this is similar to the requirements problem I've just mentioned. Focus on the problem you want to solve, then you can discuss the solution. The third problem I want to talk to you is something that irritates me quite a lot. Splitting user stories in technical boundaries. Sometimes you bring a user story, let's continue the example of the price, and developers will look at you and say,
I want a task for the front end, otherwise I cannot implement this.
And the other will say,
but I need a task also for the back end.
And then someone will look and say,
but I also need a task for the concept. Can we split into 3 different user stories?
Let's step back. User stories. I haven't heard that is roles stories or technical stories. User stories is always from the user's perspective. If you, as a product owner, bend to the developers by writing user stories like, as a front end, I want to have the API so that I can present the result for the end users. Where are you fostering collaboration? You are not. You are just using the user stories as a way of organizing the work for the developers. It's not about this. It's about building a shared understanding and to find ways of building the right solution for the problem. The moment of splitting the user stories into technical boundaries like front-end, back-end, UX, and so on will happen during the sprint planning. Once we are refining, we are still on the problem framing phase. We're not discussing the solution, so don't focus on these. And if developers say it's impossible to implement these in one sprint, you should find a way of splitting that fits in one sprint. So imagine a cake. If you slice a cake vertically, you have a slice and it's still tasty. You can eat that and it's still cake. But if you slice the cake horizontally, it's not really a cake. So this is the same as the technical boundaries. If you slice front-end, back-end, well, it's not usable for the end user, right? You need to think about what is the next step the team can do in one single sprint. But don't split into technical boundaries. Split that into users' functionalities, users' needs. It's all about the users. That is the focus. And now we come to the fourth problem. Don't force everything into user story. It's a misunderstanding that while you are working with Agile, Scrum, or whatever it is, all the items in the product backlog should be written in the user story format. It's not about that. You should write in the format that makes sense. Sometimes user stories make sense. Sometimes it's a kind of overhead. For example, you want to set up the backup routine. Then developers go and think, okay, what should we write? To be able to recover the data in a case of a disaster, as developers, we want to set up the backup routine. Do you really need that? Isn't that too much? If it doesn't sound natural, it's wrong. Just make it simple. Set up the backup routine. Developers know what to do in this case. Let's go back to the idea of the user story, to build a shared understanding. When you come from the user's perspective, you need to ensure everyone understands the problem. And that's why the user story is beautifully to be used in this case. But if you come from the development perspective, why are you gonna use this? Don't try to force everything. You will just create overhead, which is not needed. If you want to know more about user stories, I would like to recommend 2 books for you. The first one is this, User Stories Applied by Mike Cohn. This book is really useful. Before I didn't understand user stories at all. Then after reading this, it was amazing for me. And the second one is User Story Mapping by Jeff Patton. And if you want to know more how to use user stories, you should really dig into that. And to summarize what we have just said here, user stories is always from the user's perspective. And it's not a tool to represent requirements. It's a tool to foster collaboration. It's not about complexity, it's about simplicity. Ensure you don't forget the invisible part, the conversation with the team. That is what will lead you to build a shared understanding. And I would be happy if you could keep at least one thing from this video. Great user stories are no more than an invitation for a great conversation. Keep it as simple as possible. If you like this video, thumbs up. And I would be curious to know your experience with user stories. Write down the comments. If you like the content, subscribe for more. and I wish you a lot of fun while working with user stories. Thanks for watching!